I heard my daughter say it before I even realized she was speaking to me. It would be a gift if you just died. Her voice floated across the entryway of her house on that cold, bright morning in Columbia, Missouri, hitting me with a precision that felt rehearsed, almost practiced. I remember the cake box trembling in my hands, the smell of vanilla still warm from my kitchen, slipping into the air between us. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. A woman my age can doubt her ears sometimes, but not this time. Not with those words, not with that tone. If you're listening closely right now, please like the video. It helps stories like mine reach people who might need to hear them. I looked at her face, searching for a crack in that cold expression, some sign that this was a terrible joke or a moment of anger she would immediately regret. Instead, I found nothing but an eerie, settled calm. Her eyes slid past me, as if I were a stranger on her doorstep. As if I had never carried her inside my body, never stayed awake through fevers and heartbreaks, never emptied my modest savings again and again to keep her life running smoothly. The silence behind her, inside the house I helped her buy, felt heavy enough to crush bone. But that was only the beginning. My breath came in short bursts. I could feel the cold air on my tongue, though inside my chest everything burned. I whispered her name, Janet? Like saying it might bring her back, but she turned away, leaving the doorway open as if daring me to step inside and pretend everything was normal. I stood there for several long seconds, cake still in my hands, and realized I could not cross that threshold. I was no longer welcome. I felt the ground shift under me, the way it sometimes did in winter storms when ice formed beneath the snow. I had no idea what they were planning next. The breeze stirred the edge of my coat, carrying with it the distant sound of traffic from Providence Road. Birds chirped from the tall trees lining her street, their songs painfully cheerful. I didn't answer her. I didn't argue. I simply stepped backward, clutching that cake like it was the last soft thing left in my life. I remember thinking how strange it was that something as simple as baked sugar and flour could feel like a shield against my own daughter. But this moment would soon detonate everything. Driving home down Stadium Boulevard, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. The cake sat untouched beside me, the white frosting ruined where my grip had crushed one side of the box. My chest felt too tight, as if grief had reached inside and squeezed around my heart like a cruel hand. I had always imagined aging would bring gentleness, maybe some aches, maybe loneliness at times, but never this. Never a sentence that cut through every memory I still cherished. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that the hurt they caused made your body forget how to breathe? Back in my little house near the University District, I set the cake on the counter, though I couldn't look at it. My kitchen smelled warm, lived in, safe, the way a home should feel. But suddenly, all that comfort turned hollow. I sat at the table, the afternoon light falling across my notebooks, and something in me cracked. I reached for a pen, though my fingers trembled hard enough to make my handwriting shake. For the first time in my life, I wrote down every dollar I had ever given Janet. At first, it made me nauseous. Then it felt like confession. Then it felt like I was tracing the outline of a ghost, my own disappearing self. I flipped through old checkbooks, bank statements, notes I had scribbled to myself on grocery receipts, tires, medical bills, college classes, a honeymoon trip she couldn't afford, 1,000 small rescues, a dozen large ones, the down payment on her house, the $60,000 that had taken me decades to save in quiet, careful increments. I had never counted the total before. I had never dared. When the number formed on the page, I stared at it for a long time. $520,000, nearly 30 years of sacrifice, nearly 30 years of believing that love meant solving every problem she had before she even knew it existed. The air around me felt colder suddenly. I touched the page with the back of my knuckles. It didn't feel real. But that figure was the truth, and the truth has a way of making everything else collapse. For a while, I just sat there, letting the weight of that number rest across my shoulders. It felt like all those years had climbed onto my back at once, whispering in my ear the things I refused to see. I remembered the early signs, how she began saying, "I deserve it" more often than "thank you," how the requests became expectations, how her husband joined the chorus until I could no longer tell where her entitlement ended and his began. Looking back, I should have paid attention to the way she looked away when I tried to talk about boundaries. But I pushed it aside. Mothers do that sometimes. We choose blindness, believing it is love, and yet the shadows grow. I should have walked away then, but I didn't. That night, sleep avoided me. I paced from room to room, touching furniture as if the solidity of wood might keep my sanity from unraveling. I replayed her voice again and again. Those words were not spoken in heat. They were spoken in certainty, as if she had been waiting for the moment to release them. I sat in my armchair as the hours crawled by, the street lamp outside painting soft orange shapes across my carpet. I remembered her as a little girl, cheeks sticky with frosting, laughing as I pushed her on a swing in the park. A memory that once warmed me now stung like frostbite. What happened next is still hard for me to believe. Sometime close to dawn, when my chest finally loosened enough to breathe deeply, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Anger I had known before, brief flashes when she dismissed my concerns or spoke sharply. No, this was something colder, steadier. A clarity I had never allowed myself to feel. I stood up, went to my desk, and opened my laptop. I searched how much the money I had given her over the years might have grown if it had been invested. The totals made my stomach twist, not because of regret, but because of realization. Realization of how completely I had abandoned myself in the name of being needed. My house was silent as the sun rose, and in that silence, I made a decision. A decision that felt like placing both feet on solid ground for the first time in years. I whispered it aloud, only to myself, no more. The words steadied my heartbeat, slow and calm, like a metronome guiding me toward a new rhythm. Someone else noticed too, someone I did not expect. My neighbor Helen knocked on my door around 7 a.m, worried because she had seen my kitchen light on all night. When I opened the door, she studied my face for a long moment and said softly, "Christine, something happened." I didn't tell her everything, but I told enough. She placed her warm, wrinkled hand over mine and nodded with the firmness of someone who had survived her own storms. "You do not deserve that," she whispered. "You never did." Her voice cracked slightly. That single sentence became an anchor in the fog of my confusion. But that morning held another turn I did not see coming. After Helen left, I put on my coat and took the drive to the bank. The February light glinted off downtown windows as I parked near the old brick buildings. Columbia has always been a place of students and families, of baristas who learn your name and quiet mornings in coffee shops. For years, I believed this city had softened my daughter too, that she was safe here, emotionally sheltered. But as I walked into the bank, I knew that safety had never existed. Not for me, not from her. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and printer toner. A young teller with kind eyes greeted me. I explained that I needed to close the joint account with my daughter. My voice shook at first, but then steadied as I signed the papers. A strange relief washed through me, like unhooking a weight that had been pulling me underwater. As I left the bank, the sun felt warmer on my face. But this moment wasn't resolution. It was merely the first thread I pulled, unaware of the unraveling it would cause. From there, I drove to an attorney's office near Broadway. The receptionist offered me tea, but my hands were too shaky to hold the cup. When I sat across from the attorney, a calm woman with dark eyes full of quiet empathy, I felt a swell of shame, not for my daughter's words, but for my own years of silence. I told her everything: the money, the account, the way Janet had spoken to me. The attorney listened carefully, then said, "Christine, you have more rights than you think." Her voice carried no judgment, only gentle strength. We created a formal notice for Janet and her husband. They would have to buy out my share of the home I helped fund, or the house would be sold. I updated my will. I protected what remained. When I signed the last document, my breath shook, as though I were exhaling years of stored grief. This is where the story turns. Driving home afterward, I knew something irreversible had happened inside me. For so long, I had believed that being a mother meant letting myself be devoured in small, quiet ways. But as the afternoon sun lit the trees around me, I felt like the leaves carried a message. Stand, even if it shakes you. That evening, as I sat in my living room with the attorney's folder on my lap, the phone began to ring. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. My chest tightened, Not from fear this time, but from certainty. The mortgage payment had failed. Janet had discovered my withdrawal. Her messages grew louder, more frantic, more accusing. "How could you do this to us?" she shouted in one of them, her voice cracking with indignation. "You're putting us out on the street." I sat in silence, listening as her husband chimed in with his own layered anger. They spoke like people who were suddenly afraid of losing control. Their fear told me everything, but I stayed still. I did not call back. I did not apologize. I simply sat with the knowledge that something inside me had finally stopped bowing. My hands felt steadier than they had in years. The night air drifted softly through my open window, cool but gentle, carrying with it the faint sound of distant cars on College Avenue. A strange peace began to settle over me, fragile but real. They had not yet seen the woman I was becoming, and they had no idea how much further this would go. I returned to my living room that night, with the phone still buzzing every few minutes, each vibration crawling across the coffee table like an insect I refused to touch. The messages from Janet and her husband piled up, one after another, each one dripping with outrage, disbelief, and something disturbingly close to entitlement. But instead of shaking like I once would have, I felt a curious stillness settle inside me, as if my body finally understood a truth my mind had been too afraid to accept. When the phone rang a ninth time, I muted it. The quiet that followed felt like a warm blanket. Not comfort. No, comfort was still far away, but a boundary, a line drawn in the sand. If any of this resonates with you so far, consider subscribing to the channel. It truly helps me continue sharing these confessions in full. I sat there, my hands resting on my lap, listening not to the ringing, but to the steady tick of the old wooden clock on my wall. It belonged to my late husband. He had cared for that clock like a living thing, oiling the gears every winter, smiling to himself whenever its chime sounded just right. I placed my fingers on the clock's polished surface, letting the smooth curve remind me of steadier years. Years before Janet grew into someone I barely recognized. I should have sensed this storm long ago. I remember thinking something was off, though I pushed it aside. But ignoring cracks doesn't stop foundations from breaking, and mine was about to split wide open. Sometime near midnight, I walked into my bedroom. My legs felt strangely light, as if a layer of dread that had long been wrapped around my joints had slipped away. I lay down without changing clothes, staring at the ceiling, until the shadows gathered in patterns I recognized from old sleepless nights. But unlike those nights spent worrying about Janet's bills, Janet's moods, Janet's near-constant crises, I wasn't pacing, and I wasn't praying for peace. I was waiting for a feeling I didn't yet have words for, waiting for the moment when the truth would settle into me like a stone finding its place at the bottom of a river. But sleep once again did not come. Instead, memories did. I saw Janet at 10 years old, sitting at our small kitchen table, her elbows propped beside her homework while she asked me questions about spelling. I remembered the way she used to lean her head against my arm when she didn't understand something, trusting that I would know the answer. I remembered her freckles, her giggling, the tiny snort she used to make when she laughed too hard. And I remembered the promise I whispered to her the day she was born. "You will never be alone, my girl." Not ever. A painful heaviness anchored itself beneath my ribs. That promise, I had lived by it. But she hadn't, and she wouldn't. Not now. Not after telling me the only thing she wanted was for me to die. My breath trembled, and I pressed my hand to my mouth as if I could push the memory of that moment back out of my body. But the body remembers. It keeps score. And mine trembled under the weight of all the forgotten hurts, all the unseen sacrifices, all the swallowed words I had endured for years. The tense quiet in the room wrapped around me. But that quiet was lying to me. Something far louder was coming. As dawn stretched pale over Columbia, I forced myself from the bed. I opened my curtains to a sky streaked with thin clouds, the kind that meant the morning would be colder than the air let on. My house felt strange, familiar yet foreign, as if I were seeing it with new eyes. The carpet, the sofa, the chipped paint on the windowsill. This was my home, paid for by my hands alone, my space, my sanctuary. For years, I had quietly feared that Janet might someday try to claim it. "To take care of me," she once said. But I had seen the way she wrinkled her nose when she visited, as though my life smelled old. as though my home were an inconvenience she might someday be forced to deal with. I shivered. The fear flickered, then dissolved. I had already taken the first step toward protecting myself. Now I needed to take the next. After showering and dressing, I made myself tea. The steam rose into the air like faint ghost smoke. As I held the warm cup, another knock sounded at my door. My body tensed instinctively, knotting in my stomach, breath freezing for a heartbeat before relief washed through me. It was Helen again, bundled in her pink winter coat, her silver hair tucked into a soft knitted hat. "Christine?" she said gently. "I was thinking about you all night." The sincerity in her voice softened me. The presence of a witness, a real human being willing to acknowledge my pain, felt like the first true kindness I had received in months. I led her inside, and she sat with me as I explained what had happened since she left the previous morning. Her eyes widened. "They expected you to continue paying the mortgage? Even after saying something like that?" I nodded. She shook her head. "Some people only value what they can take, and when they lose access to it." Her voice trailed off, but I understood her meaning. Loss turns manipulators ugly. But this ugliness had deeper roots than I realized. We talked for nearly an hour, and somewhere in the middle of our conversation, Helen reached for my hand again. "You're not alone." The simple statement pierced through the fog in my chest. But the day ahead had more to reveal. Later that morning, I drove to the grocery store. I thought being among people might steady me. The parking lot was half full, students milling around with coffee cups, the smell of freshly baked bread drifting from inside. But just as I reached for a cart, my phone vibrated again. I almost ignored it, until I saw the notification. 10 new voice messages from Janet. 10. My hand grew cold against the metal of the cart handle. I tapped the first message. Her voice sliced through the speaker like a blade coated in sugar. "Mother, what you've done is unhinged. You're acting irrational. You need to fix this before things get worse." Worse. The word lingered like smoke. The next message was sharper. "You can't just pull money without warning. That account was for emergencies." A short, humorless laugh escaped me. Emergencies had always meant their emergencies, never mine. Another message followed. "We're your family. We deserve your support." The entitlement in her voice felt like a slap. My heart thudded against my ribs, not from fear, but from something colder and clearer than before. Something gathering strength. Finally, the last message. "Fine. If you want to do this, we'll get legal help. Don't blame us for what happens next." Legal help. They were escalating. I should have felt frightened. Instead, I felt awake. And maybe that scared me most of all, because the woman I was becoming didn't tremble at threats. The woman I was becoming remembered she had rights, resources, and her own quiet, sharpened dignity. But what I didn't know then was that the storm brewing would soon pull others into its path. People who had seen more than I realized. And their involvement would change everything. I left the grocery store without buying anything. My appetite had vanished, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. I drove to the post office and mailed the attorney's formal notice. My hands didn't shake this time. As I slid the envelope into the outgoing slot, I felt a small exhale leave my chest, as though my body had been waiting for that exact motion. Waiting to release something old, something heavy. On the drive home, traffic on Broadway slowed. A school bus stopped in front of me, its lights blinking. Children climbed out, their backpacks bouncing. A little girl wearing a purple coat grabbed her mother's hand, laughing as they walked together. The sight pierced me. Such tenderness, such unquestioned love. For a moment, a hollow ache gripped my spine. I missed the daughter I once had, the little girl who used to slip her hand into mine without hesitation. I wondered where she went. I wondered when she left. But that memory, like many others, was about to become evidence instead of comfort. Evidence that betrayal rarely erupts. It builds quietly, layer by painful layer. When I pulled into my driveway, a police car was parked beside my mailbox. My stomach dropped. 2 officers stood near my front steps. Young, clean uniforms, polite faces. My breath tightened, and my fingers dug into the steering wheel. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind flashed through 100 possibilities at once, every one of them tinged with dread. I stepped out of my car slowly. "Ma'am, are you Christine?" one of the officers asked. "Yes." "We received a call from your daughter. She said she was concerned about your well-being." Concerned. The word curdled in my stomach. Janet wasn't checking on me. She was trying to build a narrative. One where she was the victim. One where my boundaries looked like madness. I felt my breath catch sharply, like the air was stabbing my throat. But I steadied myself. "I am perfectly well," I said, my voice calm despite the tremor underneath. "My daughter and I are navigating a disagreement. There's no emergency here." The officers exchanged a look. One nodded sympathetically. "We just needed to confirm. If you need anything, you can call us." "I will. Thank you." As they left, a chill spread across my shoulders. Janet had tried to weaponize concern. She had involved the police. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a strategy. And strategies always reveal intention. This moment was a warning, even if I didn't see the full shape of the danger yet. Inside my house, I locked the door. Then I leaned my back against it, feeling the cool wood press into my spine. My hands were trembling again, but differently this time. Not from fear, but realization. Janet's panic wasn't just about losing money, it was about losing access, losing control. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and let the coldness settle in my throat. As I stood there, the afternoon light softened, spilling across my counter in warm gold. I closed my eyes and whispered a question I had never dared speak before. Have you ever trusted someone you absolutely should not have trusted? The silence answered me. I spent the next hours gathering documents, sorting them into folders, labeling them with careful precision: mortgage papers, bank statements, proof of payments, copies of texts, and the attorney's notice. Each document felt like a piece of armor. I was building something, not a shield exactly, but a foundation. One that belonged to me, one that could not be twisted or taken. As evening fell, my neighbor Helen visited again, carrying a casserole dish that smelled of rosemary and lemon. She insisted I eat. I tried. My appetite still fought me, but her company steadied my hands. She stayed until the hallway shadows grew long. When she finally left, I walked through my quiet house, touched the back of my sofa, smoothed the blanket I kept folded neatly over its edge. Everything felt so familiar, yet everything had changed. Near bedtime, I heard myself whisper a truth I had been circling all day. They never expected me to stand up. And then, a second truth, sharper. But now that I have, they won't stop here. Because people who believe they own you don't simply let you walk away. And Janet was about to prove it. But what happened next pushed the conflict into a place I never imagined. A place where family secrets, financial desperation, and a long-buried betrayal would collide in ways that still make my breath catch when I think of them. And I had no idea the next blow was already on its way. I woke the next morning with a strange heaviness behind my eyes, the kind that comes not from lack of sleep, but from too much truth settling in all at once. My house felt unusually quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I sat up slowly, listening to the faint hum of the heater, the distant rumble of a garbage truck somewhere down the street, the whisper of branches brushing against my window. Everything sounded normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Not after the police. Not after the threats. Not after hearing my own daughter say she wanted me gone from this earth. I lingered on the edge of the bed, my feet touching the floor reluctantly, while a cold realization spread through me. Janet wasn't finished. She had tried to twist the story with the police. That meant she was willing to escalate. People rarely stop at the first act of desperation. They climb, they push, they claw at whatever control they fear losing. But that morning, even with dread circling my ribs like a tightening band, I found myself breathing evenly. I felt strangely steady, and deep down, I understood why. Somewhere inside me, a part of the old Christine, the woman who had always stepped aside, softened her voice, and excused every cruelty, was slipping away. A new part, quieter but firmer, was taking her place. But that shift would cost me more than I knew. When I stepped into the kitchen, the casserole dish Helen had brought the night before was still on the counter. I touched the lid gently. The dish was still warm, as if kindness could linger long after hands let go. I poured myself tea and sat at the table, the steam rising in small spirals that reminded me of morning fog drifting across the Missouri River. For a moment, the peacefulness steadied me. Then my phone buzzed. I froze. I didn't want to look. My body recognized the pattern. The shaking inside my elbows, the tightening at the base of my throat, the prickle across my scalp. But after a few seconds, I reached for the phone anyway, bracing myself. A new message. From Janet. Not a voicemail this time, a text. Since you're refusing to speak to us, we're taking action. You brought this on yourself. My breath hitched. I set the phone down carefully, almost tenderly, as if it were a fragile object holding something dangerous inside. I took a sip of tea, but the taste turned bitter as soon as it hit my tongue. My mind began racing. What action was she talking about? Another false welfare check? Legal threats? Something with the mortgage? Something with my will? The possibilities swirled like a blizzard behind my eyes. But beneath the panic, a quiet voice whispered, "You expected this," and I had. Boundaries provoke those who depended on your lack of them. The tea cooled quickly as I sat there, unmoving. My hands traced the grain of the wooden table, the surface worn smooth by decades of meals, conversations, and small moments that once defined my life. Memories rose again. Janet as a teenager, slamming her bedroom door after I told her she couldn't take the car without asking. Janet as a young woman, dissolving into tears whenever I tried to bring up money she still owed. Janet telling me she wouldn't survive without me, a phrase that once softened me but now echoed like manipulation. These memories gathered around me, whispering truths I had never wanted to hear. Eventually, I forced myself to stand. Stillness, I had learned, could turn into paralysis if I sat too long with fear. And paralysis was what Janet was counting on. She wanted me frozen, overwhelmed, unprepared. So I prepared. I pulled out every file I had organized the day before. Receipts, bank records, mortgage documents, my updated will, copies of transfers, proof of the down payment. My dining table disappeared beneath the weight of my own history. The air felt charged, thick, as if the ghosts of every transaction hovered there, watching me finally name them. Around 9, I received a call from the attorney's office. "Christine," she said gently, "I want to remind you that you don't have to respond to anything your daughter is sending. You've taken all the proper steps." Her calmness soothed me for a moment, but I sensed something she wasn't saying. The hesitation in her tone flickered like a shadow on the edge of my awareness. Something was coming. Something bigger than angry texts or late-night voicemails. But I didn't ask. I didn't want the truth confirmed yet. Not out loud. When I hung up, I noticed the sunlight shifting across my living room floor, catching the delicate dust in the air. The floating particles shimmered like tiny fragments of glass, beautiful and sharp. That was how the world felt now. Still familiar, still mine, but full of edges I had never noticed before. I tidied the documents again, placing them in neat stacks. The movement soothed me. My breath steadied, my heartbeat found its rhythm, and just as I began to feel capable of facing the day, the doorbell rang. The sound cracked through the house like a sudden clap of thunder. I nearly dropped the folder in my hands, my legs locked in place, and for several seconds, I couldn't move. A chill pressed itself along my spine, cold as ice water. My mind whispered, "Police again, Janet? Her husband?" The uncertainty paralyzed me. I forced myself to take a step, then another. The hallway felt longer than usual, stretching out like a corridor in a dream. When I reached the door, I peered through the peephole. A man stood on my porch, early 40s, suit, clipboard, neutral expression. My stomach twisted. I opened the door an inch. "Yes?" He offered a polite nod. "Good morning. Are you Christine?" "Yes." He handed me an envelope. "You've been served." My heart dropped into my stomach like a weight being cut loose. The hallway tilted, and I braced myself against the doorframe. He turned and walked away without another word, leaving his footsteps fading down the street. I stared at the envelope. My hand shook so hard the paper rattled. The weight of it felt disproportionate to its size, as if holding it might pull me straight to the floor. Slowly, I closed the door, locked it, then leaned against it exactly as I had 2 nights earlier. But this time, I didn't slide down to the floor. I didn't collapse. I simply breathed. Deep, slow, deliberate. Finally, I opened the envelope. Inside were legal papers, filed by Janet and her husband. They were petitioning the court for control over the house I helped fund, claiming I was mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, and endangering the stability of their family by withdrawing support. They also claimed I had a history of forgetfulness and erratic decision-making, and therefore should be evaluated. A hot rush flooded my cheeks as I read. My breath grew shallow, but not from confusion, not from disbelief. from recognition. Janet was trying to strip me of power. She wanted leverage. She wanted control. She wanted, if the language in those papers meant what I feared, grounds to declare me unfit to manage my own affairs. My throat tightened. They wanted my assets. They wanted legal access. They wanted to turn my age into an accusation. I closed my eyes, and for the briefest moment, something inside me faltered. A small, wounded part of my heart cried out, a quiet, aching plea for the daughter I once knew, the girl who held my hand in grocery stores, the girl who used to jump into my lap after bad dreams, the girl who once whispered, "You're my favorite person, Mommy." My ribs constricted around that memory. It hurt. It truly hurt. I let that pain crest like a wave passing over me, not fighting it, not resisting it. I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what she had become. Then the wave receded, and what remained was clarity. I walked to the dining table, set the legal papers next to my folders, and stood there for a long moment, feeling the blood pulse steadily through my body. My feet grounded themselves to the floor, my fingers curled into a quiet, resolute fist. She wanted war, but I wanted truth. And truth has a way of surviving the ugliest intentions. I picked up my phone and called the attorney. When she answered, I spoke in a voice I barely recognized. A voice calm, clear, and anchored by something deeper than anger, dignity. "I've been served," I said, "and I'm ready to fight this." Her reply was immediate. "Christine, I've reviewed many cases over the years, and I can tell you right now, everything they filed can be disproven. We will respond in writing today." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." After the call ended, I stepped toward the living room window. Outside, the winter sun gleamed against the thin frost on my lawn. A group of college students walked past, laughing loudly as they carried backpacks filled with books and possibility. For a moment, I watched them, remembering what hope looked like on a young face. I wondered what had stolen that hope from Janet. I wondered when her heart had hardened into something sharp enough to slice through blood ties. But those questions, however heavy, were no longer mine to carry. As afternoon slipped into evening, Helen came over again. When she saw the legal papers spread across my table, her face darkened. "Oh, Christine," she whispered. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but none fell. Not anymore. Not for someone who weaponized my age, my generosity, my motherhood. I showed her the documents. She read them slowly, jaw tightening with each paragraph. When she finished, she set the papers down and looked at me, not with pity, but with fierce, protective clarity. "You're going to win," she said. "Women like you always win when they finally stop apologizing." Her words struck something deep inside me, something that had been dormant for far too long. A spark, a whisper, a lifting of weight. But I also knew something else. Antagonists don't crumble quietly. They thrash. They escalate. They expose themselves in their desperation. And Janet was only getting started. That night, as I climbed into bed, I felt my body sink into the mattress with a heaviness that was not defeat, but readiness. My breath steadied. My pulse slowed. The house around me felt solid, grounded, protective, as if it recognized I was finally defending it. Before sleep claimed me, I asked the question that had been forming all day. "Tell me, have you ever ignored a feeling you should have respected?" Because I had, and the cost was about to become even clearer. In the darkness, just as I drifted into sleep, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Janet, another blow waiting, and the moment I read it the next morning would push this conflict into a place I had never imagined. A place where love, loyalty, and truth would collide so violently that only one of us would walk away with dignity intact. But that part of the story was just beginning to reveal itself. I woke before dawn the next morning, the room still wrapped in darkness, as if the world itself were holding its breath. For a few long seconds, I couldn't understand why my chest felt so tight, why my hands tingled as though I'd been gripping something in my sleep. Then I saw the faint glow of my phone on the nightstand, the message Janet had sent the night before, still unread, still waiting like a blade hovering above a pulse. I sat up slowly, bracing myself. Even the act of reaching for the phone felt heavy, as though my arm needed to move through water. Outside my window, the sky was beginning to brighten with the first pale hints of morning. A quiet blush of blue, soft and slow. But inside me, everything felt rigid, cold, suspended. With a breath I didn't quite trust, I opened the message. "Mother, Since you refuse to act rationally, we've taken steps to protect ourselves. Don't contact us again unless it's through our attorney. You brought this on yourself. You need help. You need help. Those 3 words tightened every muscle in my body. They weren't concerned. They weren't loving. They were a setup, a foundation for painting me as unstable, a justification for the legal action they were taking, a seed they hoped would grow in the soil of anyone who read their claims. My hand trembled slightly, but I set the phone down with deliberate care. I sat there in the half-dark, yet letting those words sink into me, not as truth, but as revelation. They weren't responding to pain. They were responding to loss of power. And people who rely on exploitation rarely forgive independence. I stood and made my way into the kitchen, the wooden floor cool beneath my bare feet. The world outside was still quiet, the kind of quiet that settles over neighborhoods before college students spill onto the sidewalks and commuters fill the streets. I boiled water for tea, but as I reached for my favorite mug, my hand froze halfway. Through the window, I saw headlights. A car I didn't recognize pulled up in front of my house. My heartbeat quickened. I stepped closer to the curtains, watching carefully through the narrow gap. A woman stepped out, late 40s, professional clothes, a leather bag in her hand. Her posture was firm, not aggressive, but purposeful. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight toward my front door. My palms grew damp. A wave of dizziness swept through me. I steadied myself against the countertop. A knock. 3 firm, measured taps. I recognized that rhythm. Not police, not a neighbor, a social worker. My legs wobbled. I took a slow breath, the air feeling thin, fragile. I opened the door just enough to meet her eyes. "Good morning," she said, her voice polite, controlled. "Are you Christine?" "Yes." "I'd like to speak with you for a few minutes. Your daughter called our office yesterday." A numbness seeped into my fingertips. My lips parted, but no words came out at first. The social worker glanced at her clipboard. "She expressed concerns about your well-being. Our job is to make sure you're safe, that you're thinking clearly, that there's no cognitive decline that might put you at risk." I stared at her, the words sinking like stones. This was no coincidence, no misunderstanding. Janet was attempting to create an official record, one that could undermine my autonomy, my legality, my credibility. If the social worker documented anything concerning, Janet could use it in court, could use it to claim control, could use it to paint me as incapable. I steadied my voice. "I'm perfectly well." She nodded gently. "I understand. Would you mind if we talked inside?" I hesitated. My instincts screamed no. Opening my door felt like opening myself to scrutiny, to misinterpretation, to a narrative Janet wanted to build, but refusing might look worse. I stepped aside. "Please come in." She entered quietly, looking around with an observant but professional gaze. My home was tidy, warm, filled with years of memories, photographs, books, my late husband's clock ticking softly from the living room wall. Nothing chaotic, nothing alarming, but still I felt exposed, as if every object might betray me. She sat at my kitchen table. I sat across from her, my hands folded tightly. "Can you tell me," she began in a gentle tone, "what happened between you and your daughter recently?" For a moment, I felt my throat tighten, fear knotting itself in the hollow of my chest. But then something inside me steadied, a quiet strength, a clarity built from truth. I told her, not everything, not the depth of betrayal, not every cruel detail, but enough to paint an accurate picture. The financial history, the recent events, the legal notice, the attempt to involve police, the false allegations being made. The social worker listened carefully, nodding slowly, her pen scratching across the page now and then. Her eyes softened at points, especially when I repeated Janet's sentence, "It would be a gift if you just died." A flicker of shock crossed her face. When I finished, the room felt strangely still. The only sound was the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the steady grounding tick of the clock. She closed her folder. "Christine, nothing you've said suggests cognitive decline. You're articulate, aware, organized, and your home is well kept. You've taken appropriate legal steps. You seem lucid and capable." A soft breath escaped me, almost a gasp of relief. "But," she continued, "I do want to note something. When adult children make reports like these, it can sometimes stem from financial conflict, especially when they anticipate inheriting assets." My heart hammered. She knew. She saw it. And that acknowledgement, not from a friend, not from someone who loved me, but from an objective professional, felt like the first stone placed in the foundation of my vindication. "I'll be submitting a written report," she added gently. "And based on our conversation, I'll be indicating that there are no concerns regarding your cognitive or emotional stability." My body sagged, a release of tension so profound my eyes stung with relief. But before I could express my gratitude, she leaned forward slightly. "Christine, do you feel safe?" The question pierced me. Did I? Emotionally, no. Spiritually, no. But physically, yes. My home was safe. My boundaries were beginning to hold. But the psychological onslaught, that was another matter. "Yes," I whispered. "I do." She studied me for another moment, then nodded and stood. "If anything changes, please call our office. And if it matters, I'm sorry. This must be very painful." "It is," I admitted softly. "But thank you." After she left, I closed the door quietly, resting my forehead against the wood. My breath came out in uneven waves. Relief, fear, exhaustion, and beneath all of it, resolution. Janet's plan had failed, but people rarely stop at failure. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and let the coldness ground me. My hands were still trembling with leftover adrenaline when my phone buzzed again. A new email from my attorney. "I've reviewed the petition they filed. We have grounds to counterclaim, especially given today's incident with the social worker. Call me as soon as you're ready." For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. Counterclaim. The word felt powerful, solid, like a shield and a sword all at once. But before I could call her, another knock sounded. I flinched so violently, the glass nearly slipped from my hand. I turned slowly, pulse thudding in my ears, and walked back to the door. When I opened it, my neighbor Helen stood there, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her expression tight with worry. "Christine," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to tell you something. I didn't want to burden you, but after seeing the police car yesterday and then the social worker this morning." She swallowed, her hands twisting around the straps of her purse. "I overheard Janet and her husband last week. They were standing outside near their car. They didn't see me. They were arguing about money. He said something about getting their share before it's too late. And Janet said..." Helen closed her eyes briefly, as if the words pained her. She said, "Don't worry, she's old. We'll handle it." A cold shiver crawled down my arms. Helen opened her eyes again, filled with troubled sincerity. "Christine, they've been planning something for longer than you think." The room seemed to tilt, time stretching and tightening around me. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. But Helen wasn't done. "And one more thing," she whispered. "They said they were going to talk to someone at the bank. Something about access. I didn't understand it then, but now," my breath froze. "The joint account, the history of transactions, my age, their narrative." A chilling truth settled into me. They hadn't reacted out of sudden anger. They had been preparing for this, plotting, positioning themselves. My skin prickled with a cold electric awareness that moved through every vein in my body. And yet, even with that realization expanding inside me, I felt something else rising too. Strength, a kind I hadn't used in years. I straightened slowly, my voice steady when I spoke. "Thank you, Helen. Truly." She reached out and touched my arm. "You're not alone." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "I know." After she left, I returned to the table and stared at the piles of paperwork, at the folders neatly arranged, at the proof of everything I had given and everything they were trying to take. I exhaled deeply. Then I picked up the phone and called my attorney. She answered on the second ring. "Christine?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I want to move forward with the counterclaim." "Are you sure?" I looked at the document spread before me, years of sacrifice, devotion, erasure, and felt my heart steady with a certainty deeper than fear. "I'm sure." And that moment, clear, quiet, irrevocable, marked a pivot I could feel in my bones, a point of no return, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't protecting Janet. I was protecting myself. But the closer I moved toward the truth, the more Janet and her husband spiraled into frantic desperation. Their next move would arrive sooner than I expected, and it would not be quiet, or legal, or safe. And I had no idea that the darkest revelation of all was still waiting, hidden in a place I never thought to look. A revelation that would shatter the last illusion I had ever held about my daughter, and expose the real reason she wanted me gone. I did not sleep the night before everything finally broke open. My body lay still, but my mind moved like a river in flood. Fast, dark, unstoppable. I kept seeing the social worker's face, the sympathy in her eyes, the quiet understanding that cut through all the lies Janet had tried to build. I kept hearing Helen's voice trembling as she told me the truth she had overheard. And beneath all of that, beating steadily like a second heart, was the knowledge that the counterclaim papers were ready to be filed in the morning. It was strange. You would think fear would have consumed me, that I would have paced the halls with my hands wringing, whispering prayers into the dark. But instead I felt something different, something unfamiliar, a calmness so deep it almost frightened me. At 73 years old, I had discovered the kind of peace that arrives only when the last illusion dies. And mine had died with the sound of my daughter's voice telling me that my death would be a gift. Sometimes, when we lose the thing we held on to the longest, our hands finally open for something else. The house was still and quiet as dawn crept over Columbia. The faint chirping of early birds drifted through my window as I rose and dressed. The familiar creak of the wooden floor under my feet felt like an old friend tapping my shoulder, reminding me I was still here, still alive, still mine. I made tea, letting the warmth settle into my fingers, but before I could take a sip, my phone buzzed. Not a message, a call. I froze. It was my attorney. I answered quickly, holding the phone with both hands. "Christine," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I need you to come into the office this morning. There's been a development." My stomach tightened, but my voice remained steady. "I'll be there." When I stepped outside, the cold morning air kissed my cheeks, sharp but refreshing. I drove through the quiet streets, past the university buildings, past the families walking dogs, past the coffee shops just opening their doors. This town had been my home for 40 years. I had loved it fiercely. And for years I had believed Janet loved it too, that she loved the warmth of its neighborhoods, the safety of its people, the familiarity of its seasons. But that belief was just another illusion I would shed before the day was done. When I reached the attorney's office, she greeted me with a look that told me she had been waiting anxiously. "Christine," she said as we sat down, "your daughter and her husband attempted something last night." I felt my heart beat slow, as if my body knew it needed steadiness more than speed. "They contacted the bank," she continued. "They tried to get access to your personal accounts, not just the joint one you already closed, all of them." A cold shudder crawled across my back, but it wasn't surprise. It was recognition. A puzzle piece slipping into place. "And when the bank refused," she added, "they demanded a freeze on your assets, claiming you were experiencing cognitive decline." I inhaled sharply. The air caught at the back of my throat. "But the social worker's evaluation is already recorded," she said. "Her report completely contradicts their claims. And because they attempted to seize your accounts without legal grounds, it actually strengthens your case, dramatically." I closed my eyes for a moment. Relief washed over me, but not the soft kind. It was sharp, structured, like the release of a metal clasp that had been digging into skin. When I opened my eyes again, she continued, "I'm filing today, and Christine, this counterclaim will hold them accountable. Their accusations, their attempts to seize property, their pattern of financial exploitation, you have every right, legally and morally, to reclaim what you gave." I nodded. "Do it." She gave me a long, steady look. "Are you ready for what comes next?" I exhaled slowly. "I am." As I stood to leave, she added softly, "Christine, I want you to know something. Not many people your age stand up for themselves this way. It's brave." Brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt awake. An awakening, I've learned, often feels like shedding old skin that was never yours to wear. I left the office with the sun warming my shoulders. The sky was a brilliant blue, almost too bright for the heaviness of the moment. As I walked to my car, I felt myself breathing deeper, fuller. The air tasted clean. But that clarity did not prepare me for what happened next. When I pulled into my driveway, Helen was standing on my porch. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. "Christine," she said urgently, "I came as soon as I saw them." "Who?" "Janet and her husband. They're inside your backyard. They've been walking around the house, looking in your windows." A cold jolt shot through my chest. My heart hammered painfully against my ribs. I ran toward the gate, and sure enough, there they were. Janet stood near my back porch, arms crossed tightly, Her chin lifted with defiance. Her husband paced beside her, muttering under his breath. They looked up when they saw me approaching. "Mother," Janet said, the word sounding like an insult on her tongue, "we need to talk." My hands curled into fists at my sides, not from aggression, but from the need to anchor myself. "What you're doing is disgusting," her husband snapped. "Trying to steal the house out from under us. After everything we've done for you." I almost laughed, a bitter, quiet laugh that tried to slip out of my chest. "Everything you've done for me?" Janet's eyes narrowed. "Stop playing the victim. You know you're not capable of managing your finances alone. We tried to help you before things got worse, and this is how you repay us?" The manipulation was so thick in her tone that it clogged the air around us. I took a slow breath. "You told a social worker I was unstable." "We had to," she said. "You're making reckless decisions." I blinked slowly. Reckless decisions like closing a joint account you were using without my consent? Her jaw tightened. "Or expecting you to pay the mortgage you never contributed to." I continued. "Mother, you're being dramatic," she snapped. "This is about protecting the family." The family. The same family she had tried to weaponize against me. The same family whose survival she believed depended on my slow disappearance. Something inside me snapped into place. I stepped forward slightly, feeling the cold grass beneath my shoes, the winter air brushing against my cheeks. "Janet," I said quietly, "I know what you tried to do last night at the bank." Her eyes widened, not with guilt, but with fear. "You don't understand," she said quickly. "We were just—" "No," I interrupted gently. "You don't understand. This was never about protecting the family. This was about protecting your access to my money." Her husband scoffed. "You're delusional. We don't need your money." "Then why?" I asked. "Have you tried so desperately to control it?" Silence. Real silence, the kind that reveals truth by refusing to fill the air. Janet looked away first. Her husband finally snapped. "You're going to regret this." But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I could feel the strength in my legs, the steadiness in my breath, the certainty in my chest. "You need to leave," I said calmly. "Now. You are no longer welcome on my property." Janet stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Or maybe she was seeing the woman I had always been beneath the decades of silence. "You're choosing money over your daughter?" she demanded. "No," I said softly. "I'm choosing dignity and peace and the right to live the years I have left without being used." The words stunned even me. They came out clearer, stronger, more alive than I expected. Janet's face twisted with rage. "You'll die alone," she spat. I felt the words hit my chest. But instead of wounding me, they clarified something. "I'd rather die alone," I said quietly, "than live surrounded by people who wish me dead." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Janet turned sharply and walked away, her husband following behind with one last furious glance. Their footsteps crunched across the frost-covered grass. As the gate closed behind them, I exhaled a breath I'd been holding for decades. Helen approached me slowly. "Christine," she whispered, "are you all right?" I nodded. "I think, for the first time in a long while, I am." But that wasn't the end. 2 weeks later, the house Janet lived in, the one I helped her buy, was sold under court order. She received her portion. I received mine. The law recognized the truth. Her accusations crumbled. Her attempts to seize control backfired. And the court validated everything the social worker had observed in my home. When the final documents arrived, formal, stamped, irreversible, I held the envelope in my hands and felt a weight lift so suddenly it left me breathless. And that evening, as I walked through the quiet streets of Columbia, passing the university buildings glowing softly under the streetlights, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. Not happiness, not yet, but freedom. A beginning. In the weeks that followed, I enrolled in an art class at the community center. I reconnected with an old friend from church. I started attending a weekly gathering of retired women who shared stories, recipes, laughter. I learned how to let quiet moments fill me instead of the old ache of obligation. And sometimes when I passed a bakery window, I would think of the cake I once carried to Janet's house, the cake I never got to share. But the memory no longer stung. It reminded me of who I was and who I had finally stopped being. One afternoon, as I sat in a coffee shop sketching the outline of a winter tree on my notepad, a thought settled gently into my heart. I didn't lose a daughter. I lost a role that was killing me. And in letting it go, I found myself again. In the end, I learned that love without respect becomes survival, and survival without boundaries becomes sacrifice. And I had sacrificed enough. So now I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Where are you listening from? Tell me. I truly want to know. And please, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know. And if you ever feel moved to leave a super thanks, just know I'm grateful for every kindness that helps me continue sharing these stories. With heartfelt greetings, until next time.